People who have signed NDAs that have now expired, or for whatever reason are no longer valid. What couldn't you tell us but now can? House Hunters guest checking in. I never made the show because I didn't close on the house. 1. I had to have a house under contract before going on the show. 2. They would select the other houses we were interested in. 3. I was assigned another so who was more interesting than my actual so. 3. I was assigned another so who was more interesting than my actual so. That's effing hilarious. Can you talk more about that? In 2000 I was in a focus group for a TV pilot called Crime Scene Investigation. The consensus among the group was that it was cheesy and no one would ever watch a second episode of the show. I guess a 15-year run and 3 spin-offs proved us wrong. Tato Skin Chips released the BBQ flavor based, in small part, on the taste test that my dad, stepmom and I, little sister was too young, participated in. Remember back in the 80s? There were always people with clipboards in mouths asking for a few minutes to take a survey. Well, one time my dad said yes. We all walked down a weird side hall into a meeting room where the adults signed NDAs and other stuff I didn't care about was said. And then we sampled a few chips. And then we got to take home a huge bag of unlabeled except for some numbers. Penny silver chip bags and instructions to fill out a form and call a number in a week when we had tried them all. I think my parents got maybe $20 out of it. But the best part, for me, was when the BBQ flavor came out for real. I got a freaking box of chip bags. I think I can still taste them. Edited cause I leave words out. Sorry. It's not fun working for a company that is an Apple supplier. Also, I was really disappointed to see the kind of people Apple hires, at least for the kind of project we were working on. They hired a lot of smart eager young engineers who really don't know much at all but were willing to work their asses off. Over the course of a year they all went from egotistical know-it-alls to overworked and depressed. They were terrible to work with and only slowed things down. You think about Apple as this super successful company, but at this point it's more cause they have just so much money to throw at things. It doesn't matter if they're really smart. Just no one else can keep up with them in a tech arms race. It's like playing poker against someone who has a huge pile of chips. Eventually the blinds will kill you, whether they have better cards or not. I tested a game that rhymes with Destiny. I thought I was playtesting an alpha build that had no story, but it was basically what was released. I provided tech support for a series of technical planning sessions for engineers that wanted to see if this microelectromechanical system called a digital micromirror device they developed for thermal printing could be used to create an image, or maybe even video. Those sessions resulted in DLP technology, digital light processing. This is the reflective chip technology that enables modern digital video projectors that are now used in most movie theaters. I did my part to help, but I couldn't tell anyone about what I saw there. I know an engineer that worked at T. He was telling me about DLP around late 2000 and how it was going to revolutionize TV. I didn't really believe him at the time, but he was right. Pizza rolls. But instead of pizza, mac and cheese. Effing incredible. Never actually wound up in stores though. If I were a food company executive I'd recreate the things, because dear lord is there some money to be made. Oh, and there are so many flavors of candy bars that are awesome, get tested, but are never released. It's been so long I honestly am struggling to remember specific ones, but I assure you, behind closed doors people are taste testing all the candy bar flavors you wish existed. Ratatouille for the Nintendo DS isn't all that bad. Not me, but my friend was on the showing Master, season 9 I think. He had to hide the tattoo from the episode he was on for almost a year. Final Fantasy XIV was bad in 2010. Everything you've heard about release was worse in the beta. I tested both 1.0 and 2.0. The game is so much better these days. I was on an episode of Oddities where they came to my house and I sold them a mummy head for $1.600. In actual reality, they brought the head with them and then were like, pretend to sell us this head. All they want from a seller is for them to look good on TV and have a cool looking home. Cisco is a terrible company that does not care about your restaurant. Edit. To those asking, I was an MA sales rep for 3 years. It's the most money I ever made in my life, but it made me so miserable that I went back to the kitchen for a third of the salary. I used all that money I made to open my sandwich shop. We make just enough to live, but the relative happiness is totally worth it. That job ruled almost every hour of my life. Emails and texts would start at 5 AM and go till 10 PM. They trained us how to lie to customers and laugh about all the money being made. I worked with a bunch of money-hungry monsters that didn't care at all about helping restaurants. I was hired because of my chef experience, but left because I love my industry people too much to keep making money off their being ripped off. I still have it, but I jaff since I'm anonymous here lol. 75% of the donations you give to Red Cross Italy are for us. On records it's about 25%. It's a power relationship between the Red Cross and who/what asked us to gather donations for them. Having so much recognizability from the media and the people puts the Red Cross in a position where we can keep much more than declared, and the little charity/foundation/group that asked us to gather funds for them can do nothing but accept. Yeah. All the rumors about the rumored Samsung Galaxy S8 are true. You are welcome. I worked for a major tech firm that sold advertising services to other companies, but the software was so bad that the company itself didn't even use it for their own advertising. Beta tested Battlefield 2142 and the expansion for a subcontractor. The best gaming of my life. It was a pretty polished game by the time we got it. So it was nothing but having a full server of very competent players that worked together on both sides. I can't express how awesome those in-house games were. We got free copies for our work and extensive knowledge of the game, weapons, vehicles and tactics before the game launched. When it did launch we absolutely laid waste to the noobs for a good week. I got a 68 kill streak the first day the expansion dropped. Jit God scrubs. I worked for a linguistic tech service company very briefly, and my team's project was correcting speech-to-text recordings of Apple product users, in my case the Apple AirPods, talking to Siri. Your phone is always listening to you, despite what anyone else might say. Also, there are a lot of sounds and combinations of words that sound vaguely like "Hey Siri," which then turns on the device's recording and records whatever is going on in the area until the user turns off Siri. There are many people who use Siri to dictate very explicit texts to other people. It catches you off guard when you're hearing "Hey Siri" plays 100 times, and then all of a sudden you get a middle-aged man's voice going, "Oh don't worry, I'll fill that pee up real good. Send." My absolute favorite recording was a kid asking Siri what's 10 farts plus 1,000 farts? I actually googled the answer myself because I was curious as to what search results would pop up, and hilariously the first result was a Quora question: why can't I stop farting? There's also a lot of kids who try to use Siri to find porn, but they don't know or are too embarrassed to use the right words. So it's a bunch of "Hey Siri," pictures of naked ladies with no shirt, ladies in underwear and the like. A friend's dad would occasionally get a letter in the mail and suddenly be able to take about some part of a plane he helped build. That was always weird as hell. No, I wasn't an employee of insert company you called for tech support. I was a third-party contract doing support on their behalf. Plot twist, you were better off speaking with me, because my office had way higher satisfaction ratings and shorter call times than the company's own internal support agents. Obligatory not mine. My grandmother worked at Bletchley Park back in the war, and her whole life spoke of almost nothing that happened out of respect for the OSA. There were two exceptions: that the imitation game was utter tribe and insulting to everyone involved, and that anyone that worked at Bletchley and claimed to keep a diary were lying and just trying to make a quick buck selling fake stories, as it wasn't possible to work there and keep diaries, as quarters were regularly searched, as were people's personages, and the punishment for being caught keeping a diary was well known to be considered immediate and unavoidable imprisonment. I really wish she had shared more on her time there, but the secrecy of it all was so drummed into her that it was almost creed. Edit. I walked away to do the dishes and reminisce about my grandmother, and another anecdote came to mind. There was only one specific event she ever spoke of, and that was regarding the destruction of a German comms relay, or some such. I was told this story a while ago, so the specifics aren't as clear in my mind. By the Dutch resistance. Bletchley got word that the resistance had found a relay and we planning to sabotage it to inconvenience the Germans. Only problem was, Bletchley already knew about the relay and had compromised it to gather intel and keep English troops alive and avoid the Germans when necessary. But they couldn't tell anyone that they had broken the codes for the relay, because to do so would show their hand and tip off the Germans that their communications were no longer secure. So the relay was destroyed and countless lives lost instead of saved. My great aunt used to work for the CIA and played a major part in the American English's mole hunt. Her NDA was that she had to tell every family member she worked for the State Department. Once it was all declassified, they had a book on it. We found out at my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. I did contract work for a company that made large machines that pulverized and dried whatever went through them. Wet rocks to dry dust basically. The machines worked on other things. And they had two big contracts. One with the city to handle septic sludge. And another with Starbucks, who wanted to know if their used coffee grinds could be dried and reused. I had my first and only NDA for Elder Scrolls Online. I wasn't a fan of the UI and knew nothing about it, except I had two friends that were into the game. TBH, I have no clue how I even got the invite to it. I know someone who was on Judge Judy. He was the defendant and his friend was the plaintiff. He lost the case, but didn't have to pay. The network paid it. He also got airfare and hotel paid. He said JJ looked much older than on TV. Flying cars exist right now and are fully functional. My GF worked for a company that built several working versions. The major hurdle was regulatory and scalability, as in, it's hard to find factories that could be set up to churn these out. Then her company's parent company got a new CEO who decided, fuck all this innovation shit. We are just gonna keep building normal ass airplanes. Then she and her team got laid off and the company, really a wholly owned subsidiary / incubator, was closed. Then COVID hit and her former employer got a giant hammer straight to the nuts. I had an employer who made me sign that I wouldn't tell anyone where the office was. It was his former apartment. He wouldn't even let me tell the people we hired. He reached out to them personally so he could ask them not to tell anyone. I don't think it matters now, since he got evicted for not paying the rent. Haha, nice try. My military one never expires.